Majestic sequoia trees can live for thousands of years. Climate change could wipe them out. Sequoias were once found across the Northern Hemisphere, but today, they only naturally grow across the western slopes of the southern Sierra Nevada mountain range in California.There are only around 48,000 acres of sequoia groves left in the world, and the trees are now facing threats from human-made climate change in several ways. Scientists say that climate change is making wildfires more frequent and intense. Fires in June this year in the western states would have been virtually impossible without human-made climate change, according to an analysis by more than 24 scientists at the World Weather Attribution Project. A giant sequoia that was weakened by drought was then subject to impacts by the bark beetle, which then further weakened the tree and made it more susceptible to mortality from fire, he said. Hodder described the Castle Fire as something not witnessed for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. This was the first time that the fire got big and hot enough to get into the crowns of multiple giant sequoia and kill them, he said. Sequoias have survived many a drought before, and even those that were spared from the Castle Fire are showing clear signs of stress. Christy Brigham, Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park's Chief of Resource Management and Science, said the trees were shedding their needles because it's too dry. The trees have recovered from previous droughts, Brigham said, but if climate change continues and droughts become more severe, they may not be able to survive, she said. To know what these trees have survived, researchers turn to dendrochronology, the science of studying tree rings, which Clay Jordan refers to as the sequoias journals. Biologists can look at those rings and work out when it might have been affected by fire or periods of drought. They sometimes shed light on how humans have threatened them. A raft of suppression measures that authorities have undertaken to reduce forest fires has in some cases made matters worse. Forests naturally need to burn to some degree, just typically at lower intensity than they do now. Those less powerful fires burn off just enough kindling to make forests less susceptible to more intense fires. Now those fires burn hot enough that they can get above the thick barks and into the crowns of these giant sequoias, where they are vulnerable, Jordan said, noting that fires are now burning at much higher intensities than they historically did. Burned up toothpicks. When Brigham and her colleagues visited the site of the Castle Fire after it stopped, they discovered a scene of such lifelessness that she described it as a moonscape. Standing here, we've got at least a dozen dead giant sequoias. These trees were 1,500 to 3,000 years old, said Tim Borden, Save the Redwoods League's Sequoia Restoration and Stewardship Manager. Their tree mortality rate for these trees annually was less than 0.01%, and so in 1 year, in 2020, for us to see 10 to 14% of the total of giant sequoias alive killed in 1 year, in one fire. There's nothing to compare that to. That's because after lower intensity fires, sequoias can open up their cones and start to germinate, Hodder explained. Without an urgent response to the climate crisis and an improvement in forest maintenance, this tree, which has lived through the rise and fall of entire civilizations, could be lost in a single fire, like thousands of others in this forest were. They're among the most rare, the oldest, the biggest living species in the world, Hodder said. We don't have a moment to lose in getting these forests ready for our new reality.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.